water, earth, air. Resources that keep life in an aging world, but sadly, that are getting depleted and polluted more and more every day. This depletion, which was defined by the ozone layer, greenhouse gases, and the melting of the glaciers 30, 40 years ago, and thought to last for centuries, is unfortunately happening much faster and harsher than expected. Our lifestyle and preferences accelerate this process. There are many institutions and non-governmental organizations working to change this bad course of events in the world, to develop alternative solutions and to create a sustainable world, working to ensure sustainability, protect the environment in order for future generations to use and benefit from natural resources and fight against climate change. The European Union recognizes environment and climate change as the most important and challenging policy area. One of the most important factors that trigger the global climate crisis, which threatens the whole world, by the way, is traffic. The increasing number of vehicles due to urbanization, the construction of large parking lots in places that can be used as green areas, increasing carbon emissions rates, and long hours spent in congested traffic adversely affect the health of both our cities and both us. The traffic density in Turkey is predominantly caused by urban transportation. Therefore, local governments have great responsibilities to develop alternative transportation routes, expand the public transportation network, create intermodal transportation systems, and encourage citizens to use them. In the anti-climate change movement carried out by the delegation of the European Union to Turkey, the delegation has been collaborating with the Union of Municipalities of Turkey, one of the most important strategic partners in Turkey on sustainable urban mobility for a long time. We are here today to discuss the details of the agreement financed by the European Union, signed to support the sustainable urban mobility plans in the municipalities of Turkey, shortly SKHP, to be implemented under the Transport Sector Operational Program, shortly USOP, financed through the Instrument for Pre-Accession Assistance Phase 2, IPA2, by the delegation of the European Union to Turkey and the World Bank. The agenda of today's event consists of two parts. In the first part, esteemed representatives of the World Bank, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the delegation of the European Union to Turkey will discuss topics such as the importance of sustainable urban mobility plans, the difficulties in their implementation, and the opportunities provided. In the second part, Mr. Göktuğ Kara, the Sustainable Mobility and Climate Change Team Coordinator at the delegation of the European Union to Turkey, will moderate a detailed discussion about the issue with the representatives of the institutions, organizations, and non-governmental organizations, which are specialized in urban mobility. In the second part of the event, you can also participate to the roundtable with your questions. You can write your questions in the chat box below during the event. Now, I leave the floor to the host of the event, Mr. Agustanu Kovame, the World Bank's Country Director for Turkey, for sharing the details of the issue.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, sir. Thank you for joining us here today. We are looking forward to your speech. Would you please?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Thank you and welcome everyone to today's event. We are here today to launch the program for sustainable urban mobility in Turkey metropolitan municipalities. As we heard earlier, it's a 4-year program to support metropolitan municipalities in preparing their sustainable urban mobility plans. This program is financed by the European Union and managed by the World Bank, and it reflects the joint effort of both institutions to promote sustainable urban transport to improve citizens' lives in Turkey. Turkey is a highly urbanized country, as we all know, and the urbanization rate is increasing. It has increased from 75% to 85% in the past 2 decades. This is both an opportunity and a challenge. While urban areas have been the engine of growth, urban transport development often tends to lag urban population growth. In Turkey, over 700,000 vehicles are added to the road every year. Although this brings many benefits, today's transportation systems face challenges such as greenhouse gas emissions, noise pollution, fatal road crashes, and traffic congestions. In fact, according to some estimates, Istanbul was ranked as the 4th most congested city in the world in 2019. Municipal authorities and central ministries in Turkey are already deploying great effort to combat these problems, such as by improving road safety policies and regulations, promoting non-motorized transport, better public transport network, as some of the examples of what municipalities have been doing. Sustainable urban mobility plans will improve and these mechanisms and provide an opportunity to bring together these mobility initiatives and turn them into strategic and sustainable models that incorporate recent trends such as decarbonizing fleets, expanding the use of public transportation in urban metropolitan areas, expanding multimodality in transportation, moving for more fuel efficiency tax systems, using old car scrapping programs and managing second-order environmental impact of vehicle batteries, active mobilities and inclusion, innovation adoption, digitalization of transport systems, or facilitating the efficient collection and use of data. COVID-19 recovery spending and investment present an opportunity to promote cleaner and more sustainable modes of transport that could take into account new travel behaviors and social distancing while incorporating some of the recent trends I mentioned earlier. But looking toward the long term, cities and citizens need to see a fundamental transformation in urban mobility that promotes sustainability, efficiency, quality, public health, and inclusion. Indeed, sustainable urban mobility plans are ultimately about people. Therefore, the SUMPs or sustainable urban mobility plans that will be prepared under this program will seek to address the mobility needs of the most vulnerable city dwellers, including women. I am confident that the Sustainable Urban Mobility in Turkey Metropolitan Municipalities program will significantly contribute to the need of long-term transformation in urban mobility in Turkey. Today's event is a great opportunity for knowledge sharing and cross-fertilization of ideas. Understanding the challenges and opportunities that other cities have faced while implementing the sustainable urban mobility plans may help Turkish cities in proposing solutions adapted to their own context and environments. Hearing perspectives from Turkish municipal leaders and other public officials, experts from the EU, the World Bank, and other institutions such as the World Resources Institute, Transport for London, UITP Belgium, or ERTICO will shed light on the different sustainable mobility options. Importantly, today's event is the beginning of a technical support that will be offered under the program on a continuous basis. I want to thank Ambassador Nicholas Meyer-Landrut for co-hosting today's event. Thank you also, Ambassador, and the EU directors for the excellent partnership between the EU and the World Bank, which span many technical areas and many development areas in Turkey. I also want to thank Mr. Bülent Özgen, Director General for Financial Cooperation and Project Implementation, for sharing the stage during this opening session. And I would like to thank Mayor Fatma Şahin, Mayor Tunç Soyer, and other mayors and government officials who are participating in today's event and will be the real architect of the SUMPs, or the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plans that will emerge under this program. I would like to thank the World Bank and EU teams for organizing this event. And I would like to thank panelists, roundtable participants, the moderators, and all the virtual attendees who are joining us today. I wish everyone a very successful event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank Mr. Augustano Guamet, the World Bank's Country Director for Turkey, for his really valuable comments. Thank you very much, sir, indeed. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is one of the institutions the delegation of the European Union to Turkey collaborates with the most about the climate crisis and sustainable urban transportation. I would like to now leave the floor to Mr. Bülent Özcan, Director General for Financial Cooperation and Project Implementation under the Directorate for EU Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Özcan, would you please? Thank you very much for joining us here today. The floor is yours, sir.
Deniz Bey çok teşekkür ediyorum. Sesim geliyor mu?
Deniz Bey, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you all well. Okay, thank you very much then. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Ambassador, the head of delegation of the European Union to Turkey, the esteemed director of the World Bank, the esteemed president of the Union of Turkish Municipalities, distinguished mayors, distinguished representatives of the public organizations. I'd like to salute you all on behalf of the Director for EU Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is the beginning of a very important project, creating this sustainable urban mobility plan for us. So we have gathered together under this program. We'll be discussing all the works and the plannings, future plannings in line with this program. This is very important for us to share all this with you. As you all know, in the previous years, there have been very important changes in the world. While all the changes created by the climate change have been experienced by us all this summer, not just Turkey though, we have observed that similar incidents happened all around the world. And while the steps indeed for that have been laid out by the Sustainable Development Goals by the World Bank and by others, and the European Union together with the EU Commission adopted the EU Green Deal, and by 2050 there have been now targets to have a carbon neutral Europe. And in this framework, last year they adopted a sustainable and smart cities approach, and also to attain the 50% carbon target, new planning has been offered. All these steps that have been taken, from agriculture to energy, from environment to transport, they will be affecting every part of our lives. But today we have gathered here under the framework of a transport program, and maybe one of the most important reflections of all these steps will be felt in the area of transportation. So all these, and Turkey is adapting to all these changes that is happening all around the world in Europe. In 11th development plan, in the sustainable mobility and urban mobility area, important targets have been laid out, and all these targets are parallel to the Green Deal. And in the medium-term program that was adopted last week, we see that the steps regarding green transformation have been announced by the Turkish government. So all these efforts will closely impact the urban mobility, because zero-emission vehicles and the vehicles that are not using greenhouse gas in road transport or
ulaştırma sistemlerinde yine karbon salınımına
the citizens, while being transported more in line with reducing the carbon emission rates, are all under this scope. So in this respect, there is a great responsibility for the local governments to get well prepared for this process and to have the right plans and to make the right investments. So this project that we are opening here today, the project of creating sustainable urban mobility plans, is very much related to this issue. While the delegation of the European Union, Turkey, and the World Bank cooperating with us and with the support of our Minister of Transport and our ministry. In some of the pilot municipalities, the sustainable urban mobility plans will be created in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, Green Deal, and those Turkey's targets for green transformation. And also the municipalities also will be creating mobility plans and transport plans that is in line with the carbon reduction targets. Of course, transport is one of the important areas for us. While we started using the instrument for pre-accession assistance phase 2 since 2012, and since then around 1 billion worth of resources were used in the transport projects. A big part of it was the big investments like the railway investments, but the rest of it was also invested in urban transformation and also urban mobility. And also we have now entered into a new era in terms of the European Union grants. Well, this IPA will be also implemented as IPA 3 in the future, and while projects and other efforts focusing on urban mobility, sustainable urban mobility will be covered by that, but also blending mechanisms that we gather the grants together will be used for other projects under in the relevant areas in Turkey in cooperation with delegation of the European Union, Turkey, and World Bank. So it's very important. I'd like to thank everyone who has supported us, and I'd like to thank the delegation of the European Union to Turkey and the World Bank for making all these efforts, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Mr. Bülent Özcan, Director General for Financial Cooperation and Project Implementation under the Directorate for EU Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for his invaluable comments. Thank you, sir. Well, reducing the impact of climate change and sustainability are among the important goals of the European Union support in the transport and mobility sector. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Nikolaos Meyer-Landrut, the Ambassador of the European Union and the head of the delegation of the European Union to Turkey, to speak about these goals and the projects carried out. Mr. Meyer-Landrut, would you please, sir? Thank you very much.
So now I hope you can hear me.
Yes, exactly. Perfectly. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, dear moderator. Thank you, Deniz Bey, for organizing be here with us. Distinguished Director of the World Bank, dear Auguste, distinguished Director General, dear Bülent, distinguished participants, but last but not least, and most importantly, dear mayors, I'm very happy to be with you today, and I want to extend my welcome to all those who also are in our virtual audience. I hope that there will come a time where we can sit around a table together. Today, we as European Union and delegation here to Turkey of the European Union are happy and proud to announce our cooperation project with the World Bank to support the 10 selected Turkish cities on their journey to prepare, develop, and implement their sustainable urban mobility plan. We all know that the journey for reaching sustainable mobility will be a long one, will require a lot of changes, both for our administrations, but as well for the citizens. Transport represents a major source of pollution in urban areas with serious consequences both on health and mortality. We need to tackle it. carbon emissions from urban transport still continues to grow. So we have to facilitate cleaner transport options so that they become a natural choice. We know that citizens want to move to cleaner alternatives, provided they are safe, reliable, and affordable. A sustainable urban mobility plan is an answer to these challenges. It improves air quality, reduces road death, and brings in human-oriented approaches to the transport planning. European and Turkish cities are among illustrations of the diversity of options we have in terms of urban mobility today. Of course, these many options come with their respective challenges, which have to be tackled. We still mourn the fresh memories and victims of the past summer. We have seen how wildfires and flash floods destroyed ecosystems, killed human beings and animals around and across Europe and also in Turkey. These extreme weather events and disasters are mostly related to the impending climate crisis. Our response should not be delayed anymore. In the EU, we have set very ambitious overall climate objectives. We want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, which means a 90% reduction in CO2 emissions. And we have put in place what we call the Green Deal to try to achieve these objectives. This requires big economic and social transformations, but we need to tackle these challenges together to fight climate change and its consequences. So I'm happy to see Turkey as one of our most important partners to mitigate the effects of climate change, to limit global warming as much as possible in line with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Now, at this stage, I want to thank all those who are involved in this project, in the Turkish administration, in the World Bank, and in particular in the different municipalities. I wish you a lot of success. Our all well-being depends also on the success of urban mobility. Thank you very much.
Mr. Nikolaos Miro-Landrut, the Ambassador of the European Union and the head of the delegation of the EU to Turkey. Thank you. Indeed, thank you very much for your wonderful speech, sir. Thank you. Mr. Tunç Soyer, Mayor of İzmir Metropolitan Municipality. Hoş geldiniz.
Welcome.
Çok teşekkür ediyorum Deniz Bey.
Thank you very much.
Dear Ambassador, His Excellency, dear August Kome, dear Mr. Bülent Özcan, dear participants, I'm honored to take part in this meeting organized jointly by the delegation of the European Union to Turkey and the World Bank. The Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, in short, SUMP concept, played an important role in adopting a new transport planning culture in Europe. SUMP is defined as a strategic plan designed to meet the mobility needs of people and businesses in and around cities for a better life quality. The Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan is based on the active participation of citizens and stakeholders in all transport-related issues. Contrary to traditional approaches, this planning approach draws a nature and human-oriented roadmap that increases accessibility and welfare. Since the European Commission introduced the SUMP concept in 2009, many European cities have adopted this method, and this new approach has replaced the traditional transport master plans, aims at improving the overall life quality in cities, underpinning our strategic choice to apply SUMP in İzmir. Based on these points, the İzmir Metropolitan Municipality decided to develop the new transport master plan with the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan methods. As a result of our application to the IPA 2 of the European Union, our municipality was entitled to carry out the project with a budget of nearly 3,200,000 euros and became one of the leading cities in Turkey to prepare a SUMP with the IPA 2 technical assistance. 85% of this budget, 2,719,000 euros, will be given as a grant by the European Commission, and the rest our own co-funding. We are also delighted to receive technical support from the World Bank dedicated to Izmir Metropolitan Municipality for the implementation of the SUMP project. The general goal of SUMP in Izmir is to provide safer, cleaner, accessible, and convenient mobility for our citizens and to establish strong ties between the city and the surrounding natural ecosystem. This plan will embrace an Izmir transport vision that is socially, environmentally, and economically sustainable. The vision of the city of Izmir, which supports public transport policies, will be renewed more strongly within the scope of SUMP. We see the SUMP process as an opportunity to reduce individual car use, increase bicycle and pedestrian access, develop shared micro-mobility opportunities, and create a nature and human-centered city center rather than a vehicle-centered one. In our world, which is struggling with the global climate crisis, we are establishing an egalitarian, economic, and nature-friendly transport system for Izmir to improve the resilience of our city. I wholeheartedly believe in the importance of SUMP's implementation in Izmir and other cities to combat climate crisis and to establish a life in harmony with nature. Once again, I would like to thank the delegation of the European Union to Turkey and the World Bank for organizing this crucial event. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Mr. Tunç Soyer, Mayor of the Izmir Metropolitan Municipality, thank you very much for your really exceptional presentation. Thank you very much, sir. As you all know, dear participants, one of the most important issues today is the pandemic, even though the devastating effects of the pandemic have eased down a bit. The COVID-19 pandemic has slowed us all in the life in the world. Decreasing vehicle usage rates during the days of curfew resulted in a decrease in emission rates in a short time while contributing to the cleaning of air. This has showed us that we can reduce our carbon footprint by developing alternative urban transportation models through correct, conscious, and planned investments, especially in public transportation. In order to make sustainable transportation a part of daily life, it is highly important that municipalities develop public transportation systems, make sustainable transportation plans, and encourage the people living in the cities to use these alternative transportation methods by raising their awareness. Well, now, Mr. Ángel Gutiérrez Hidalgo, First Counselor and Head of the Economic and Social Development section of the Delegation of the European Union to Turkey, will share with us his presentation, Sustainable Urban Transport Plans, Opportunities and Challenges for Metropolitan Municipalities of Turkey. Mr. Gutierrez, would you please, sir? Thank you.
Yes, hello, good morning to all. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes. Perfectly, sir. It's
okay.
Really,
okay, so thank you. So first of all, I would like also to thank the World Bank, and of course, on behalf of the European Union, we are very pleased, as my ambassador mentioned before, to launch this action together, which is also very much in line, as the other speakers explained, with what we want to achieve at European level in terms of Green Deal, and also the very ambitious goals that we have set in the fight against climate change. This means, of course, that Europe aims to become a climate neutral continent by 2050. So this is indeed a colossal effort that we need all to do, which will also imply a reduction of over 90% in the carbon emissions. So this affects all parts of society and economic activity. And of course, also when we see, we know that cities are probably one of the major contributors to climate change. Cities consume about 80% of world energy. It's also about 60% of the greenhouse emissions come from cities. And as we know also, there come major sources of pollution affecting our quality of life and also health. In Europe, about 400,000 premature deaths occur every year due to air pollution, mainly from cities. And also we have many other more sickness and chronic respiratory diseases due to air pollution. So as I said, this requires a complete transformation, which is also what the Green Deal wants to achieve. And in terms of urban mobility, this transformation needs also to happen. This needs us to think differently, to think greener, to think also how we can still have a better transport, more efficient, cleaner, but also smarter. So there is where SUMPs come, and also this is how we want in Turkey to promote and to contribute to this paradigm change in the way we plan and we create, implement our transport systems. It also SUMPs therefore come as a response to these urban challenges in a comprehensive and coordinated manner. So they affect first and foremost the urban infrastructure, which needs to be designed in advance to take the benefits of this planning. We also have to design and change our transport methods, and particularly also the public transport. So with SUMPs in Turkey, we hope also that these benefits will affect directly the citizens, because they will see improve in traffic flows. We'll see reducing congestions. We will also incentivize the use of public transport, and also more active mobility from pedestrians, or also the use of bicycles. So all this in the end will also have a quite big impact in a better air quality, which, as I said, has a strong impact on the health of all. So with less congestion also, we will have more economic gains, because the cost of congestion every day is huge as well. We have lower carbon emissions. And finally, I would also like to stress one important impact of SUMPs, which is reducing road accidents. With SUMPs, we can also create a better infrastructure, reduce speed. And for instance, in the city like Warsaw, where they implemented the SUMP, since its implementation, road deaths in the city went below 60%. So from our side, from the European Union, we are therefore trying to implement, and we have been collaborating with Turkey and with the Ministry of Transport and municipalities since 2014 in contributing with our financial assistance to this, as I said, paradigm shift in Turkey. Above 35 million euros have been used to prepare and design 10 metropolitan train SUMPs in 10 metropolitan cities. This we will also help these SUMPs to be implemented in practice. And we have in this, as also the mayor of Izmir has mentioned, we have included the major cities in Turkey, like Izmir, Ankara, Istanbul, but also other medium cities like Kocaeli, Trabzon, or smaller like Düzce or Maraş. So with all this and other programs, like we also had before, we have together with the World Bank, the Sustainable Cities Program, where we also will now push for more cities to be included in, to be launching their sustainable urban mobility plans. And the program that we are launching today, the support to urban mobility with the World Bank, we aim to increase our assistance, to build capacity building, and also, as I said, to try to help to develop and implement these SUMPs. I will also to mention an important program that we will soon start also together with the Union of Municipalities, which will be dedicated to the capacity building and dialogue of Turkish mobilities in the field of sustainable transport. So with all this, I would like to say that SUMPs for us is not only a plan, but it's also a model that needs to be replicated. And I think the European model is therefore there available for Turkish cities. And this should also bring, as it was also mentioned, very importantly, behavioral changes in citizens. Citizens will have to be the ones that trigger this transformation, and SUMPs need, therefore, to respond to their needs so that they can see the benefits that will face every day in their quality of life, in their time to reach their office or their work, to have a better and clean environment. So we need to create with these SUMPs a positive feedback and loop and a snowball effect that will also involve decision makers at local, regional, national level. So I hope also that all these behavioral changes will be taken into account. I will just like to mention also importantly that we have next week starting the European Mobility Week, where we collaborate together with the Union of Municipalities. And I think over 600 cities in Turkey have been participating in the Mobility Week in previous years. So this is a very important action where also citizens can experience through different activities, like, for instance, the Car-Free Day, the experience of a more sustainable mobility. So I encourage also to you to participate in these activities in your municipalities and enjoy also this better mobility during at least these days. But also these actions need therefore to be sustained. And this is why SUMPs come here very importantly and have this ambition to create this space for discussion for a more efficient, clean, sustainable urban transport planning. I hope all this will result and be channeled through a more health, more well-being, and a better climate for all, for Turkey and for all the world. Thank you very much for your attention and good luck also with the project.
I would like to thank Mr. Ángel Guterres Hidalgo, First Counselor and Head of the Economic and Social Development section of the Delegation of the European Union to Turkey, for his thought-provoking presentation. Thank you very much indeed, sir. In my opinion, one of the most important messages of this program is coming from the Z generation. So, your video is ready. Let's watch it and learn their messages.
Climate activist from Turkey, Istanbul. I think transportation mobility is a big issue because transportation emits approximately 30% of the global carbon emissions. In my opinion, what I struggle with is I live in a city and I can't find any bike lanes. I want to go somewhere on my bike, but I don't have the chance, so enhancing the bike lanes could be a good solution.
Hello, I'm Doruk Dolapçıoğlu and I'm 16 years old. I'm a climate activist based in Istanbul, Turkey. We have the solutions to resolve the climate crisis. The most vital one among them is to divert from the fossil fuels in every single sector, including mobility. That's why I always prefer public transportation to commute to school and use electric scooters for relatively long distances. Of course, I encounter a lot of obstacles. For instance, there is yet to be enough subway systems or cycle paths in my city. In my opinion, fossil-fueled private cars should not be prioritized anymore in the face of the climate crisis. Local governments must work to improve the underground and public bus systems in especially big cities.
Hi, I'm Duru. I'm an 18 years old climate activist from Turkey. I think when tackling the climate crisis, one of the most important points is sustainable mobility, because transportation accounts for a really big part of our fossil fuel consumption. So we can't treat this climate crisis as a crisis without providing sustainable mobility. We need to find new ways for mobility. And I think one of the best ways to do it is, I think we need some steps from our governments. For example, I think to encourage people to have electric cars, governments can reduce their taxes on these vehicles, and they can financially support some people to have electric cars. And we need to act now, because it's now or now.
It was amazing to watch the hopeful messages of the representatives of the Z generation. I would like to thank our young friends for these messages that emphasize how important our individual efforts actually are. Well, ladies and gentlemen, do you know that sustainable mobility, thanks to sustainable mobility, the EU economy is estimated to save more than 300 billion euros per year in terms of health and tech. Turkey can also save a lot by switching to emission-free mobility in cities. By reforming zero-emission-oriented investments, we can make mobility a part of our lives and better protect our cities for the future. Now, I'll leave the floor to Ms. Matilda Kinenatto, Eurocities Mobility Project Coordinator. She will talk about the planning and management of sustainable urban mobility and the guidelines in metropolitan regions. Ms. Kinenatto, would you please? Thank you very much, by the way.
So good morning, everyone, again, from my side, and thank you very much for the invitation, especially to the World Bank and the EU delegation for having me here today. It's a pleasure to talk about sustainable urban mobility plans and how those can improve the quality of life of our citizens. And especially, I'm glad to bring in today the metropolitan dimension when it comes to sustainable urban mobility planning. Let me first start with a couple of words about my organization, Eurocities, which is the European network of major European cities. We have more than 200 cities as part of our network, including 10 Turkish cities, I'm proud to say. And we cover very different aspects of what can be of interest to the cities, from social affairs to culture to environment, and especially mobility. And sustainable urban mobility planning has been one of the biggest, I would say, pieces of work in the last years. And on this topic, we have largely facilitated learning among our members, the cities, and also shared experiences. And it's a bit on this basis and collecting the feedback of our members that we have decided a couple of years ago in 2018, when the whole process started, to develop a sustainable urban mobility planning guide specifically for metropolitan regions. The guide that you can see on screen was developed in the wider context of the revision and extension of the core guidelines for SAMPS, but is where we decided that there was a specific need for planning at metropolitan scale. So here we wanted to offer this support and provide common definitions, but also examples, practical guiding principles that could be adapted to the specificities of metropolitan regions. But at the same time, also taking into account the context-specific and institutional specific settings of metropolitan regions. Why metropolitan regions need a specific guidance, you might ask? Why do we need these specific guidelines for planning at metropolitan scale? What does it change? So as you can see from the map here, which unfortunately covers only the EU member states, Turkey unfortunately is not included, but you can see the orange spots here are the metropolitan regions in Europe. There are actually 249 of them, which overall account for 59% of the EU total population in Europe, and even 62% of all the employment opportunities we have in Europe. Overall, they also produce 70% of the EU gross domestic product. So we immediately understand the strategic importance of metropolitan regions, the weights they have, because of their demography, because of their economic attractiveness. They are urban nodes of regional or even national importance. But even more importantly, those metropolitan regions are also they have, let's say, complex multimodal transport systems where basically the local mobility needs need to be reconciled with the regional mobility needs and even the long-term national mobility patterns. So this is where the metropolitan regions are peculiar, let's say. The fact that they bring together, when it comes to planning, they need to bring together different metropolitan, different government levels and different mobility needs and patterns. At the same time, we also recognize the fact that we have different governance models when it comes to metropolitan regions and when it comes to plan for sustainable mobility. This is a classification that was made by the OECD, and that is to be intended not in a rigid way nor in an exclusive way. But let's say that we have recognized those three types of governance setups in metropolitan regions. We have sometimes municipalities that are cooperating among them in a soft type of coordination in an informal way, all at the same level. We have sometimes official structures, intermunicipal structures, where municipalities and sometimes even other levels of government cooperate in a structured way, but all at the same level, sharing the same costs and the same responsibilities. And in some other cases, we see supramunicipal authorities, ad hoc entities that are being created above the municipalities with a clear mandate to address transport policies and the SAMP development as well. So just to give you 3 examples and hopefully inspire you as well when it comes to develop your own SAMPs in Turkey. I brought here, first of all, the example of region of Central Macedonia in Greece, which is an example of an informal type of cooperation for the development of the SAMP, because here the region of Central Macedonia doesn't have the mandate by law to develop a SAMP for the metropolitan area of Thessaloniki. Nevertheless, what they did was to provide a platform for exchange to the municipalities that were developing a local SAMP in the metropolitan area of Thessaloniki, and also a competence center that could serve, provide, let's say, a technical assistance to the municipalities. They also set up an observatory for sustainable mobility, which is very interesting because it helps the different municipalities develop a coherent and harmonized data set for the development of the SAMP, and also coherent, harmonized indicators when it comes to their monitoring phase. This way, let's say the SAMP, the basis for the metropolitan SAMP creation are being developed and set in a sort of bottom-up approach, so that they are all complementary to each other. A second example that I wanted to share is the example from the metropolitan region of Oslo in Norway, which is an intermunicipal type of structure. This is an agreement between the city and the surrounding area, which is the Viken County, that was set already a few years ago for the delivery of transport policies in the whole metropolitan area. The agreement, as you can see on slides, is based on 3 pillars. On one side, there is the so-called Oslo package, which is an investment program, a financing program for the delivery of the transport services for the metropolitan area. And that is based on the funds, on the revenues coming from the toll ring system around the city of Oslo. The second pillar of this agreement, of this structure, is the public transport joint venture that the city of Oslo and the Viken County have set up, which has all the competence to develop a strategy, all the operational tasks, and even the financial tasks for the whole region. And then last but not least is the third pillar, which is the regional plan itself, a combination of land use and transport plan that was established already in 2015, and that sets the legal basis for this agreement for the metropolitan region of Oslo. The third example and last example that I'd like to share with you today comes from the third type of governance model, is the Greater Manchester metropolitan region, and it's an example of supramunicipal type of authority. Here there is the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, which is the governing body of the Greater Manchester region, which is made of the 10 indirectly elected members of the 10 districts that are part of the region, plus one directly elected mayor. And this governing body has appointed an organization, the Transport for Greater Manchester, to carry out all the transport policies for the whole metropolitan region, including the development of the SAMP, which is then developed in a centralized way, as you can imagine, being this an ad hoc entity above the 10 districts of the region, even though, of course, it's always done with the collaboration and in accordance with the 10 districts that are part of it. So here I just wanted to give you, let's say, a taste of what the metropolitan regions guidelines for SAMPs are. Inside, you will find much more. You will find, of course, all the references to the SAMP cycle, the different steps and guidance for each of them, adapted to the reality of metropolitan regions, which, as we have just seen, have certainly some peculiarities to be taken into account. You will also find a lot of good practice examples, and even more, so you can find the guide and the annex where you can find even more good practices in an extensive way. You can find them, well, there are links in my slides if they will be shared later on, but also on the ELTIS website online. So I hope this overview was interesting to you, hopefully inspiring for the discussions that are coming and for the program that you're about to start. Should you have any questions, of course, feel free to get in touch with me. Here are my details. I thank you very much, and I wish you a good continuation.
Well, thank you really very much, Ms. Matilda Chinelatto, Eurocities Project Coordinator of Mobility, for her riveting speech. Thank you indeed. Now we'll pass to another session, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed participants. Well, as you all know, sustainable urban mobility plans are designed to meet the mobility needs of people and businesses in cities for a better quality of life. The World Bank will provide the necessary training and guidance to the staff of city municipalities and support them in the designing and management of plans. Now, I give the floor to Ms. Sofia Guerrero, Senior Transport Specialist at the World Bank, and Mr. Murat Gürmeric, Senior Transport Engineer at the World Bank, to talk about the cooperation between the World Bank and the EU delegation to Turkey, their role and the scope of the agreements.
This project will be implemented under the sectoral operational program for transport, which is funded under the instrument for pre-accession assistance phase 2, that is, we call it IPA 2, and that will be implemented in the following 4 years. And it is important to mention that there was a previous IPA 2 agreement, grant agreement in 2017 that supported already Kocaeli and Izmir's in advancing on their SUMs. Anyway, so what is the objectives of this project that we are launching today? The objectives of this project is to promote sustainable, efficient, and safe transport in Turkey, as well as enhance the technical capacity of selected Turkish municipalities for preparing, procuring, and adopting SUMs. We wanted to highlight that the SUMs are designed to improve the quality of life of the residents, increasing the accessibility, improving non-motorized transport, and creating more equal and inclusive cities. So how can SUMs be defined? SUMs are defined as a strategic plan designed to satisfy the mobility needs of people and businesses in cities for a better quality of life. It builds on existing planning practices based on integration, participation, and evaluation principles. What are the benefits of a SUMP? No? What can it achieve for the city? And what is very important here is what it can achieve for the city and through the citizens. It improves the quality of life, makes the cities more livable, safer, more enjoyable, more friendly, and with more friendly, environmentally friendly and more inclusive. We have in the next slides some examples of Valencia case that speak by themselves. You can see, for example, before and after, how there is a transformation of the city towards a city with public space to be enjoyed by the citizens, that advocates for public health, safety, and accessibility, among others. SUMs recognize mitigation action under the Paris Agreement and have been designed to achieve important benefits by promoting and advocating for improvement in accessibility, public health, safety, security, equality, gender and affordability, among other urban planning and mobility challenges, and supporting the implementation of EU Green Deal targets. And now in the next slides, my colleague Murat will explain in more detail the project that we will be implementing in these next 4 years. So please, Murat.
And thank you. I hope you can hear me well. Let's proceed with the implementation timeline. So the project will be having 4 years at the implementation timeline. We will be working around 3 main pillars in that regard following the kickoff event. Next, please. Yes, and in the first pillar, we will be working around the capacity strengthening for the major municipalities. 2 stages. First of all, we will be providing a general SUMP training for all the metropolitan or the municipalities in Turkey, including all 82 of them, depending on the readiness. And as a second phase, we will also be providing more detailed actual capacity strengthening for the 10 metropolitan and larger scale municipalities that we will be working under the umbrella of this activity. The next, please. And then under the pillar number 2, we will be providing capacity building for the SUMP procurement and technical support to receive SUMP's outputs. Here we will be providing technical assistance to review the SUMP's outputs, and we'll also build capacity to relevant staff members of selected municipalities for reviewing and preparing the procurement technical documentations that will be delivered for the SUMP projects. And under the next place, under the pillar number 3, the SUMP development, which will be the last pillar of our actual project, the World Bank will be providing support to selected municipalities in any of the 12 main steps of the SUMP activities cycle to facilitate the achievement of the targets and also complete the SUMP phases, including calculation of climate benefits. Here, the bank will be supporting the municipality of Istanbul specifically here to strengthen some of its actual measures in terms of inclusive and sustainable mobility, including decarbonization. And here, the next steps will be focusing on identification. This is very important for us, of the focal points in the metropolitan municipalities, and to collect the necessary data that will be, required for proceeding with this assistance process. And then we will also be starting capacity building and workshop as soon as possible. I mean, with the COVID in mind, we will be maybe doing some of them in virtual at the beginning, but hopefully we will be transitioning to the face-to-face ones afterwards. I would like to thank you on behalf of my colleague Sofia. So here are actually emails which you can reach us at any moment should you have any questions to ask. I will thank you for the moment and hope to see you at the end of the event. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your valuable contributions, Ms. Sofia Guerrero, Senior Transport Specialist at the World Bank, and Mr. Murat Gurmeric, Senior Transport Engineer at the World Bank. Thank you indeed, both of you, and also for joining us here today. Well, as you know, with a decision taken by the European Union, the European Mobility Week is celebrated every year from 16 to 23 September. Since 2002, Turkey has been actively participating in this week under the national coordination of the Union of Municipalities of Turkey. Despite the pandemic last year, more than 500 municipalities celebrated it. Well, for this program, we have specially asked 3 very important questions to the metropolitan municipalities. Well, to the mayors, we asked our esteemed mayors. The first question was like this. What has been done so far for sustainable mobility in your cities? The second question was, what are the biggest challenges against mobility in your cities? And the third, and in my opinion, the most important question was, we asked our esteemed mayors, when do you think that your cities will become green and 100% sustainable in terms of mobility? Of course, they have given very interesting answers. Let's watch them.
In Istanbul, the main challenge is, of course, the 16 million population we have and the increasing mobility needs, complex land usage, less than adequate metro ways are also complicated highway structure, and also the uncoordination between the relevant institutes. The biggest challenge we have is the fact that the previous administrations have always prepared their plans based on the vehicle usage. I mean, people were encouraged to use more vehicles, and people love using cars anyhow, so they wanted to commute with their cars, and the city was planned accordingly. So unfortunately, we have a lot of challenges related to increasing mobility, and the biggest challenge of the pandemic was actually to make people stay away from public transportation. But we're not planning our city based on transportation. We're planning our city based on public transportation, and we prioritize nature-friendly investments. This pandemic that we're going through, apart from many disadvantages it brought along with, brought some advantages too. We realized that our urgent need is to transform the city life in a way where people can live within the nature. And now we are striving to do this under the umbrella of urban mobility plans.
Bu konuda 2017'de yaptığımız ulaşım
Well,
planından
in
dolayı
2017,
önemli bir akıllı ulaşım altyapısı oluşturduk.
The transportation master plan. We have a smart infrastructure, because the more variety you have, the more smart you have to become. So even when you come outside of the city, you should be able to use the city transportation infrastructure very easily. So within 1 hour of the public transportation, for instance, in our city, the young people don't pay for it. And we also increase the bicycle lanes to 55 kilometers in Gaziantep, and we have constructed so many bicycle lanes. For instance, you have one from city center to the university campus. We encourage the young people to use bicycles. For that, we have organized bicycle races, for instance, in order to develop the railway, to metro bus practices, to smart transportation and signalization systems. We have invested a lot, and we continue to do so. In 2019 September, we started the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan of Istanbul. So until 2040, we have actually have a well-established strategy for the mobility in Istanbul, and we continue to develop projects accordingly. Well, in order to let our
people stop using their cars. First, we opened 2.5 kilometers long of bicycle lanes. Then we have started to build 60 kilometers of bicycle lanes. That tender will be announced very soon. Also, to our universities, we have built 28 kilometers long of bicycle lanes, and from now on, we will continue to open bicycle lanes as much as possible. The reason for this is that the young people gain the habit of cycling and using that when they become adults. So from
yoğun bir propagandayla bunu gerçekleştireceğimize inanıyoruz.
Out of every metro and bus station, you have the place where you can rent the bicycles. We have invested 2 billion for the Narlıdere metro construction. We have completed 70% of this project. 414 million was further invested to another railway. We added 450 new buses to our fleet, and we're getting prepared for the biggest project in Izmir. 1.1 billion euros is the tender of Bucak Metro, which will be finalized very soon. We have organized the pavements, we have added new bicycle lanes, and we have the electricity buses which are going through the test drives right now. So we have taken a lot of important steps, and I'm very happy to tell you that these projects are just the beginning in Mersin.
When do you envision your cities will become green and 100% sustainable in terms of mobility? Hopefully, in this new period, when this is also going to be taken into the investment plan, very nicely, this new period will be indeed laying the foundation of the infrastructure that will solve the public transport problems of the city. Parallel to the sustainable mobility goals of our city and anti-climate change, and in line with the C40 deadline 2020 program commitment we made, by 2050 our city will be sustainable in terms of mobility for sure. Unfortunately, I cannot say that we'll be able to make our city in harmony with mobility, because especially in Ankara, people aren't even used to use public transport. If people start using public transport first, I think the mobility will follow, but I can say that this is going to be a bit of a challenge. I cannot give you a timeline, unfortunately. To build a sustainable city by 2030, the steps we are going to take in Izmir are being planned under the guidance of many international experts and in cooperation with many organizations. As we strengthen the bond of Izmir with the world, the global knowledge, expertise, and financial resources become more accessible, and we use these resources to enhance the welfare of our citizens. Izmir Metropolitan Municipality's first ever in Turkey Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan is being financed by the European Union and will be prepared in cooperation with the World Bank, which I'm really very proud of. Mersin can only exist if in harmony with the nature. The local environment-friendly vehicles and the railway system that we're going to include in our public transport network, the traffic management that prioritizes the pedestrians and the bike lanes will help Mersin become more mobile and greener city.
Sustainable urban mobility plans adopt mitigation actions under the Paris Agreement. These are designed to provide significant benefits, among other things, by enabling and advocating improvements in accessibility, public health, safety, security, equality, gender equality, affordability, and other urban planning mobility challenges, and supporting practices towards the European Union Green Deal goals. Now, Claudia Adriazola-Steyer, Director of the Health and Road Safety Program at the World Resources Institute, which operates in many fields for the sustainability of the world, unfortunately couldn't be with us today. However, she shared her opinions with us via a video. Let's watch it.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Washington, D.C. My name is Claudia Adriasol Style, and today I would like to share with you how your sustainable urban mobility plans can have an impact on the health, climate, and the development of your people. Please allow me to share my screen. Cities are super powerhouses. 85% of the global GDP is produced here. People love to come to cities. In the year 2000, there were 370 cities with 1 million population. Today, that number has climbed to 550 cities. There is no doubt that people come to cities to have better lives, happier lives. And so I took a look at the World Happiness Report to see what matters for cities. 4 areas that are really important for urbanites. The first one is they are coming to access jobs. They are coming to access better schools and better health. And their commutes matter. Look at this example from Mexico City. The bright yellow areas and the green bright areas are spaces where people live and their commutes are about 30 minutes. The rest of the populations have commutes that can run from an hour to 6 hours a day. So when you make your mobility plans, getting access to all these people that are in the fringes of the city is an absolutely #1 objective. Second, people don't like to be sitting in traffic. Istanbul, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, is ranking right now as the 5th most congested city. And other Turkish cities are following that trend. So demand management will be critical when you plan for your cities. Third, people come to cities to have better lives, healthier lives, and they are worried about the air quality. We see that cities like Istanbul or Ankara have 5-6 times higher PM emissions than the ones recommended by WHO. But Turkish cities are not alone. In the year 2016, a study found out that 90% of people living in urban areas were breathing bad air. And that was leading to 4.6 million people dying prematurely. There is another silent killer, which is physical inactivity. Humans, in order to be healthy, need to be active. What does it mean? At least 30 minutes of physical activity, and for children, around 60 to 90 minutes a day. Turns out we are not getting that minimum physical activity, and that is leading to serious illnesses such as cancer, diabetes, heart disease, or mental illness. Look at this study that has come out from the UK. The mental health in children during the pandemic has worsened. What can you do as you plan your mobility for your cities? You can plan for places where people can walk and can cycle safely. That takes me to another very important topic, which is road safety, traffic crashes. Remember that the first cause of death for children ages 5 to 14 and young people 15 to 29 are traffic crashes. This is something absolutely unacceptable and something that you can start planning in your mobility plans. You can see that in cities, about 40% of vulnerable users of the road are dying. And those are the ones that tend to be the most sustainable, especially pedestrians and cyclists. Fourth, people care about green spaces. They want to have access to parks. That really matters for their well-being. It's heartbreaking to see what happened in Turkey in this summer, that has endured one of the worst fires in its history. Climate change is very real. 70% of the global greenhouse gas emissions are produced in cities, and the transport sector accounts for 25% of them. So your planning also has to be very much aware of the climate change challenges that we have right now. So these are my recommendations. From mobility to access for all. Action area number 1, build a network of safe and complete streets. Second, develop an ecosystem that is integrated and user-oriented. And third, manage private vehicle demand. I also like very much the 8 Ds of Professor Gilles from Australia. She recommends to look at the destination accessibility, equitable distribution of employment, diversity of land use, optimal residential density. In terms of transport, she recommends focusing on reducing distance to public transport, designing pedestrian-friendly and cyclone-friendly networks, but not only that, enhancing the desirability of active travel modes. And one that I'm putting in bright yellow here, demand management. The question is, can Turkish cities do this? And my answer is, yes, they can. Look at the modal share of your cities. Most of your people walk, cycle, and use mass transportation. And your motorization rates are not as high as the ones in Europe or in the United States. This is key for you to build sustainable urban mobility plans now. Let me give you a couple of examples. The first one, this is Freiburg in the south of Germany. In 1960s, they decided they wanted to have a sustainable transport city. How? First of all, by controlling car traffic and by investing in active mobility and mass transit. What are the results? They have 70% of their population that can access a tram within 500 meters. They also have extensive pedestrian paths and cycleways. What was the goal? A city of short distances that can be accessible to everyone. And I'm so happy you are listening today because leadership absolutely matters. Second, this is Paris, that just last week decided to make the city a 30 kilometers per hour speed limit city. Why? Because speed kills. And 80% of people that are hit at 30 kilometers per hour can survive, but you still have a 20% that will die. So making the city at 30 kilometers per hour will allow you to also have more people walking and cycling and using mass transportation and be safe. This is the answer of the vice mayor of Paris when he was asked why your city is going to be at 30 kilometers per hour. Because we don't want noise, we want to reduce traffic crashes, we want to reduce pollution, and we want to improve the fluidity of the traffic. If you are planning for a city where you want cycling, safety is key in order to get children, women, and the elderly too. This is another example from Madrid, where they found out that a lot of the time, they just had in their streets cars parked. And they decided to do what they call the super blocks, where they concentrate, in this case, 12 blocks, and the speed limit there is 10 kilometers per hour. Cars can enter, but they have to go slow, and the streets are becoming greener streets. So we want to go from this model to a model that is more inclusive, that is better. And I just want to finish this conversation with a quote from Thomas Edison. Good fortune is what happens when opportunity meets planning. Happy planning. Thank you, everyone.
Well, I would like to thank Ms. Claudia Agriazola-Stahl, Director of the Health and Road Safety Program at the WRI, for her invaluable contribution. Well, by the way, this completes the first part of our event. In the second part, as I have mentioned before, we will have a roundtable where Mr. Göktuğ Kara, the Sustainable Mobility and Climate Change Team Coordinator of the Delegation of the European Union to Turkey, will discuss the issue of sustainable mobility in detail with his four guests. Well, crowded cities, increasing number of vehicles, rapidly increasing air pollution levels. As a citizen, myself, it has been a wonderful event which helped me understand that simply walking and cycling are important not only for my own health, but also for the future of the whole world. And that alternative methods such as public transportation and low-carbon electric vehicles can change the fate of cities, countries, and even the world. I personally deeply support the European Union's target of reducing carbon emissions in transportation by 90% until 2050, a goal set by the European Green Deal. With the efforts of municipalities, the financial and strategic support of the European Union, and the consultancy of the World Bank, we can ensure that sustainable mobility is adopted by everyone for a greener and more sustainable world with lower levels of carbon footprint and for our future. Now on now. But now I would like to leave the floor to Mr. Göktuğ Kara, the moderator of the roundtable for a discussion of sustainable urban mobility plans with participants from various countries. My sincere thanks to all our participants and speakers. Well, Mr. Göktuğ Kara, thank you very much for joining us and taking the load over my shoulders, because mostly I would be the moderator for those kind of roundtables. It's a little different for me, but well, it's nice, by the way, I have to say. Well, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Deniz Bey. I think you have so far done from my session speakers. A warm welcome to you all. Today we are going to continue what we have started on discussing about the sustainable urban mobility plan. From different parts of the world, from different backgrounds and experiences, it will be, I hope, a nice session. Today, let me start this way very quickly. We have seen the pandemic world in the last 1.5 years, 2 years now. The lockdown has changed the landscape of urban mobility quite radically. Things have started changing. The oil demand went down in the last year, maybe by half. Road fatalities started going down. New concepts which were developing, like 15-minute city concept, which is designed to reduce distances, speeds, and for demand management, a perfect concept. This has started coming up. Cities adapted to the changes quite strongly. Pop-up bike lanes coming in different cities, now becoming permanent. But now the question is, the pandemic will end, and are we going back to normal? I think this is the important question we need to ask ourselves. And I would like to start with today with George Darido, who has extensive experience in developing countries. George, a warm welcome. Sorry for the delay. I hope you're there with us right now.
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, so I think it would be good to hear from you, George. What has been the experience in the developing countries and the challenges in the last 2 years? And can you tell us what you have seen and the sustainable urban mobility? How did this help for the cities to build resilience and to respond to the pandemic? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Pleasure to be with you today. First, I want to address non-motorized transport, NMT, also known as active mobility, which means walking and cycling. As we have heard, these are very important modes, fundamentally because they're sustainable, but they're often overlooked in mobility plans in developing world cities, and for a number of reasons. First, because walking and cycling trips are sometimes not captured in surveys, and this is really a mistake. They can be as high as half of all short trips made in a city, and they should always be prioritized. There are new mobile-based tools to estimate desired origin destination trips, the connectivity of sidewalks and bike infrastructure networks, and the difficulties for users. So these are new opportunities. Second, active mobility projects may be small in size compared to other infrastructure and perhaps less interesting for leaders to showcase. But this is also a mistake, and I believe this perception, I think, is changing. A third, non-motorized transport may be built, owned, and maintained by different entities, sometimes even private parties. So they can be just as complex as large projects involving many stakeholders, and that sometimes can be a challenge. Finally, is often difficult to take. Is often difficult because it may take away valuable space, particularly when implementing new walking, biking, or public transport infrastructure. And usually there is some resistance from other users, for example, car users that have a lot of power. So among the many lessons of the pandemic, it has shown us that the quality of walking and biking infrastructure are really critical, not only for people's mobility, but also for health and well-being. And not only that, but non-motorized transport complements public transport services and should be the priority mode for which public transport should be the priority mode for medium and long distance trips. So non-motorized transport should be a fundamental part of any sustainable urban mobility plan and should be part of the new normal. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you. I think this was really a very sharp intervention, right on time. I appreciate, because I think our session, I would like to also go for a second round, just for housekeeping purposes. There will be a second round of questions. Thank you very much, George. I think you mentioned the importance of non-motorized transport. This is also very critical. I'd like to continue with Sashi Verma, if you agree, who is an executive in the Transport for London, and he has extensive experience with the London's rail network. Welcome, Sashi. I mean, London adopted this strategy, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2018, and the emphasis was on health, on 80% of all trips to be made on foot, public transport, or cycling. And of course, it is quite an ambitious target. How has it been developing? Because the healthy streets and the impact of disruptive technology was underlined in this strategy. How has it been developing? London did a lot of interesting things in the last, let's say, 10 years, congestion charging, and then Oyster card, integration of Oyster card. Sashi, over to you. We are very excited to hear your views.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me to the session today. I think our story really goes back to about 20 years, where the creation of Transport for London as a very integrated transport authority gave us the opportunity to try and experiment with many of these things. And if you look at the things that have happened over the last 20 years, then even before the term sustainable urban mobility was invented, we were doing these things. And if you look at the key sort of factors that have contributed to London's success over the last 20 years, Then there have been a number of supply side issues, putting more emphasis on improving the public transport network, better rail networks, better bus networks, more facilities for walking and cycling. Those are all things that I would call are supply side interventions, and they're quite extensive in London. Anyone who's been to London, today, but also anyone who's got memory of London from the 1990s will see the transformation that's happened over the last 20 years. But equally, there are demand side factors that are also important. So pricing has been used as an incentive to move people towards sustainable transport, the congestion charge being one of those factors, but also the pricing of public transport has been a big factor in that. But there are other things that are softer and they're very material that shouldn't be forgotten in this. Once you get away from the basic availability, reliability, and safety of public transport networks, the question of how to make it attractive becomes the most important issue. So things like how to pay for public transport, how to get information about public transport, these are all factors that become quite critical in making sure that people who are very comfortable driving will feel comfortable leaving their cars and getting onto public transport. So I think when we think about sustainable urban mobility, very often the interventions that are thought about are supply side interventions, how to put more buses, how to put more walking and cycling. The demand side factors are equally critical. And it's the combination of all of that and the integration across all of them that has made London successful. The target that we've adopted so far in the last London plan is the sustainable urban transport should go from a mode share of 63% to 80%, which is a very, very challenging target to be delivered over the next 20 years. We should be under no illusion about just how challenging that target is. But if you look back to the history of the last 20 years, then London is one of those rare large cities where the mode share of sustainable transport has actually increased. So if you look back to 2000, only 53% of journeys were being made by public transport, walking and cycling. That's now 63, 64%. That's a very, very significant improvement at a time when most cities have seen a reversal in the mode share and an increase in car traffic. So that actually paves the way. It shows us what is possible. It also shows us the kind of interventions that work. But the challenge in the coming years is much, much bigger than what we've delivered so far.
Thank you, Sashi. Very interesting. I'll follow on this one because I'm really curious to know this 20 years, 10%. Do you see an acceleration in that rate in the next, let's say, 20 years? But okay, we'll come back to you for the second round. Very interesting views. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to continue with Johanna Sinataki. Always a pleasure to see you in our gatherings. Artico has been very active last year in Turkey. Johanna, thank you very much also to get today being with us. I would like to hear from you. What is happening? Because our audience today is Turkish municipalities. You have been in touch with them. Some of them took part in the Moonshot City survey. So what has been latest developments on the Artico side with the EU, within the EU? Tell us the news from the EU side. Especially, I would like to focus on the SUMPs and your, let's say, latest developments.
Well, thank you, Göktuğ. Thank you for the invitation, first of all, in this very interesting event. I'm following from the beginning the discussions. Let me tell those of you who are not familiar with Artico that we are a Brussels-based organization. ITS stakeholders, ITS standing for Intelligent Transport Systems. We have 120 members from the private and the public sector. So ministries, cities, but also automotive industry, service providers, traffic service, traffic information providers, research centers, universities, and so on. So we are predominantly running innovation projects. We are forming consortia and we run these projects with the funding of the European Commission. Of course, after we submit and we win, it's nobody gives it to us on the plate. But what we see is a lot of emphasis from the European Commission in terms of funding, of course, on the digitalization and the greening of transport. And that's exactly what we're trying to do: safe, efficient, sustainable mobility. And intelligent transport systems is addressing these traffic volumes that was mentioned this morning, the pollution, the noise, this modal shift that was mentioned by previous speakers. Bicycles and walking are the modes that we are looking at, and ITS is getting into the bicycles because of the gadgets that the bicycle users are using, and how we can integrate this into the traffic management. Because of course, traffic, we all think it roads and cars, but it's not about roads and cars anymore. It is all about finding a balance between what the city needs and prioritizes on, and what the other stakeholders are all about. So the bicycle lanes are important. Sorry, I hear an echo, but couple of projects that are working on it, and one very successful one was C-Mobile, we call it. It's all about this V2I, vehicle to infrastructure communication, I2V, so infrastructure to vehicle communication, about giving a green wave of to the users of the road network, either they are bicycles or pedestrians or cars, where you see what is the optimal speed to drive so that you get see the green traffic lights, so that you don't increase the carbon emissions, the pollution, and so on. But not only that, we have worked with cities in another project like Elviten, it was the name. It finished recently. Rome, Bari, I think it was also Genova, Malaga, Trikala. And these cities really worked, and the project really focused on supporting this shared electromobility, the use of electromobility. And how does this contribute to the SAMS? And I'm finishing. It is all about promoting the innovation on the sustainable urban travel. It is about promoting the shared electromobility for urban, discussing about cargo bikes that are the non-motorized vehicles mentioned by George before, and the smooth market deployment of the green mobility for a green urban future. So we are working on this field a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Johanna. When you were saying promoting the innovation promoting the sustainable urban mobility is important, your voice got very slow, so I think that was the emphasis about.
Yes,
I know.
It was on purpose.
yes, that was like the slow motion you see in the games. But okay, so we go to Kaan in the first round, the last participant. Kaan, welcome to the session. You have extensive experience in Turkey. You worked in Turkey, and now you are with the UITP, and it's always also good to see you in our events. So what I would like to understand is the public transport has been particularly hit hard during the pandemic, and we know also from Turkish experience that most of the municipalities are really having difficult times. And what UITP has been doing, do you have any innovative ways or any suggestions to take on this one? And please feel free to contribute also connecting of your last 2 years of experience with the within the pandemic.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone who are joining to the panel. Actually, it's a pleasure as UITP to contribute this event, and as well to give support to the project of EU delegation Turkey and World Bank for supporting the public transport and sustainable urban mobility in the Turkish cities. Actually, your question is very important. When we look at the COVID-19 crisis, there were especially the three striking elements for the sector which were apparent. You know, we saw a big change in the mobility patterns during the crisis, decrease of public transport usage and increase of car usage, and as well cycling and walking. We saw big financial impact, the financial crisis impacting all actors in the sector, and as well quick and agile responses to the crisis. The transport authorities and operators all over the world had to respond quickly with the effective solutions to guarantee safe mobility, protection of the staff, and infrastructure during this crisis. And of course, this included adapting the mobility assets like roads, curbs, pavements, and services such as on-demand public transport and shared mobility. When we look at the details of these responses that were provided by the different mobility agencies all around the world as a response to the crisis, we can list a lot of things actually. And when we look at this first, what I can give the example of adapting the level of supply for public transport. This was one of the most important challenge, and which was one of the most important response given to the crisis. Setting up of some specific bus routes for some dedicated services, some on-demand services, ensuring a safe travel environment with some hygiene measures. This was very critical as well. Liaising with the users and the public. Actually, what I can tell is that the communication became more and more essential during this crisis period than it was in the past. We saw that implementation of demand management practices became more and more common during this crisis, especially for changing the travel time and as well flattening the peak time travel. This was very important that we have seen. High-level deployment of digitalization. This was very critical during this crisis. Maybe we can take this also as one of the benefits, the most significant benefit of the crisis, that authorities were using digital tools to regulate the mobility in the cities, and operators were using it for easing the operation of the cities. And as well, in some parts of the world, we have seen changes in the governance and regulatory approaches. So this is very, in summary, what we have noticed during the crisis. And also it's very important to see what are the lessons learned from pandemic for urban mobility and SUMP processes for the future. What kind of takeaways that we need to take as a lesson that we should consider for the future, not only for the global cities, but also for the Turkish cities, that we can have some lessons learned from this pandemic. And if we go for these lessons learned, actually, we just published as UITP a paper 2 months ago about these lessons learned. And then we identify 10 key lessons from the pandemic that each city should be considering for the future regarding the urban transport management and specifically for SUMP processes. And from this perspective, the first lessons learned that we identify is general, not about only transport, but it can be relevant for different sectors. It's about strengthening the culture of risk preparation and management by the different authorities. That's the first thing that what we can be mentioning. And second thing, how to orientate our future policy goals. So what should be the future main orientation of the future policy goals, especially in the SUMPs as well. And what we say here is that given the long-term challenges related to the global warming, social equity and economic sustainability, a car-light city is the future. This means no reduction of transport services, nor investment during or after the crisis. So what we can mention as well as a lesson learned from this crisis is that the need for better tracking the lifestyle and mobility trends are essential. It is key to understand the trends, the user needs, and as well involving the users in the decisions. So we will be needing more participatory processes for the future. Paying more attention to demand management practices. We will definitely see in the future more. After this crisis, demand management is becoming more essential, and as well maybe some people, in the past it was missed a lot, but it become more important again about the integration of transport and land use planning. And we have seen as well the deployment of digitalization will become more important after the crisis, and as well. What I can tell is that maybe as one of the few last ones, better defining of the investment priorities with sustainable funding. What could be these priorities? What I can mention is that greening the fleets, infrastructure for public transport and non-motorized modes, and as well investment into the digitalization. That's what we could be mentioning as the priorities for the investment.
And I think I'm going to ask this question in the second round. So keep the bullets for the second question. Now, let's go back to the second round, because I think I want to ask the same question to all participants, and I see the same messaging coming over from different sides and different cities. It's very interesting to hear. Sashi, can I start with you in the second round? So I think your intervention was quite interesting in the sense that you mentioned this raise. I mean, the question is, what is the most significant aspect in your view in development of a sustainable urban mobility planning? So we have a Turkish city audience, municipal audience, civil society is with us. So what would you advise to take the focus, take the attention on when, because now it's starting in Turkey, the trend is coming on. You've seen İzmir Mayor in the session. So your experience, but in the meantime, I would like to hear from you because London, you said from 53 to 63% in 20 years. Do you see, as mentioned by all participants, digitalization as accelerating this transformation? Do you see an aspect, a role in there? Thank you. Floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. But I think I will speak directly to the policymakers here, and I know that they're in the room. Let me speak to the mayors directly here. We face a very big problem in terms of sustainability and environment and many other factors of that kind. When you face a big problem, don't expect easy answers. And, you know, I think this illusion that digitalization will solve everything is a mistake. Digitalization has a very big part to play, as does non-motorized transport, as does walking, cycling, as does buses, as does everything else. The issue that we all face is that the solutions are not easy. They require integration. They require all of these things to be done. They require them to be done in a balanced manner. They require the supply to be created and the demand to be created at the same time. They require some easy policies like making things attractive by a bit of marketing and a bit of digitalization. They also require very difficult policies in terms of looking at pricing and investment, right? Please, for heaven's sake, do not think that there is an easy solution here. And what we have done in London shows you very clearly that there are no easy answers. The answers are incredibly difficult. When I look at the next 20 years in London, the sort of policies that are being contemplated, by the way, if you want to go and read what these policies are, they're all published in the Mayor's Transport Strategy. You can go and take a look at it. They are not easy. They require many tens of billions of pounds of investment in public transport capacity. They require huge intervention. One of the biggest ones is that I think over the course of this decade, it's going to become impossible to drive on London's roads without paying for it. The congestion charge system right now applies to a very small area of London. But by the end of this decade, I would expect that similar policies about paying for roads is going to become the norm across all of London. Now, you know, think about it. Congestion charge has been in London for the last 18 years now, since 2003. It's not been done by other cities around the world. You want real answers? Well, that's your solution, right? It's not building an app. You know, building an app is not going to get you the answer to something that requires very difficult policy choices to be made. And that's why I would just keep emphasizing again and again, when you find a problem that big, find a solution that's equally big, because nothing else will fit.
Thank you. Thank you, Sashi. Great answer, which encourages me to invite you more to Turkish events. I think we will have to hear about all these things in other occasions. Thank you. So can I continue with Joanna, because they also made this city moonshot survey to see what the cities are talking about. Joanna, how is your answer on this, and what are the results? Tell us.
Well, thank you, and I will tell you the results. Before that, I want to say that I agree with Shashi. It's not building an app or building another road. It is indeed going for a big solution. It is a change that should be coming, and we. If I can share my screen, so Ertiko came up with this initiative on asking actually. Let me do that. Can you see my screen? I hope you can. Yes.
Yes.
We decided to ask the cities, instead of us going along with all the stakeholders in mobility, telling the cities what to do, and trying to impose sort of the demand according to the supply and so on and so forth. We went out and we asked the cities. We're asking 300 cities on what their needs are, what their priorities, their challenges are, in order to create this database around the world on their needs and their plans. And we have managed since last year to speak to 150 cities from Europe predominantly, but also the States and Asia Pacific. In Turkey, actually, we interviewed 5. The ones I mentioned, I think Ankara, Bursa, Gaziantep, Izmir, Istanbul, we really have a good view there. But let me share, I took a sample of 100 out of the 150 interviewed already. Let me share these slides very fast with you. We asked the cities what are the main priorities in transport and mobility. And we spoke to city authorities only, so traffic management departments and directors and so on. And their number one priority is to improve public transport, which was mentioned by our colleague here. So the second is improving air quality, decarbonizing city mobility. These are the priorities of the cities, and to this, the industry should be answering. And the SAMs, in order to be successful, should be taking this into account and understanding the needs of the local stakeholders and the citizens, of course. The challenges, the main challenges in transport and mobility, as seen by the city authorities again, traffic congestion, of course, pollution and noise, resistance to change from citizens is another challenge that they're facing. Another result, transport-related actions and how to address the climate emergency, or how to support the policy of the Green Deal, or what is as a Green Deal in the other continents as well. Addition of specific bicycle lanes, which was mentioned. I think it was the first speaker in this panel that mentioned the additional bicycle lanes, and you, Göktuğ. So to your very first question, are we going back to normal that you were asking? We are going back to normal, but we shouldn't. We should change attitude. We should see what the cities need and go for SAMs and development of and build these sustainable urban mobility plans according to how we want the city to address the needs of the citizens. And my last slide is about mobility as a service, is this multimodality that this mobility service is bringing. We asked about this, and out of the 149 cities already have MaaS, or are currently implementing MaaS, at least within the next 1 to 5 years, and that is important. So, and as you see in the other pie next to this in the slide, it is a matter of this cooperation between the public and the private authorities. So that is how Ertiko is supporting this entire discussion. We are the authors of the guidelines in SAMs for the ITS and for MaaS, and we are here to support all the work that cities and other stakeholders need in building it. So thank you, Göktuğ.
Super. Thank you very much, Joanna. I think this was really complementing also a view from the cities, how do they see the situation for themselves. So now, George, maybe let's continue with you for this same question. You mentioned the non-motorized transport in the first part. Yes, what is for the SUMs the most important aspect?
Sure. Well, first, I want to say I agree very much with the other panelists. I think Sashi mentioned the importance of pricing and in terms of travel behavior. I agree very much with Kaan, the importance of public transport and the sustainability of public transport, which is undergoing a crisis in many cities. Public transport is fundamental, is essential in terms of sustainability. And Joanna as well on thinking about this mobility as a service and and these partnerships that are required between public and private. What I would say is the most important element of SAM is really to define, quantify, and balance multiple objectives for a city. I mean, I think we've heard today, obviously, mobility or the ease of movement is critical. And this is for both people and goods, by the way. Goods are sometimes overlooked. But we've also heard today other related objectives. The other side of the coin to mobility is accessibility. So what share of people or goods can actually access infrastructure and services to be able to move around? There are other important objectives, of course. We've heard safety, security, equity, convenience, reducing pollution, etc. So I think that having a well-balanced, sustainable urban mobility plan is about balancing all of the important objectives, and this is why it requires the view of many stakeholders, and it will allow you eventually to create an investment plan that actually responds to people's needs and to the constraints on resources that are available. So I think this would be my answer. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, George. Very concrete, and it also helped us to think also a bit on the vision side, and equity emphasis is important. Kaan, back to you as our last intervention. Then, of course, we may have some questions from the crowd. Please go ahead with your reply.
Thank you, Göktuğ. Actually, maybe I can answer this question not from the perspective only of the pandemic, but also in general perspective. With
absolutely. This is a general question.
Yeah, with attention to the Turkish cities mainly, or this can be even a case for the many cities coming from the, let's say, global south, from developing countries. What I think is that maybe for the Turkish cities, one of the most important things that we need to ensure when we are preparing sustainable urban mobility plans is how to ensure the politic will and politic support later for the implementation. This is linked with also what Shashi said in his speech earlier. So it's very important that to get on board with the political decision makers in terms of the implementation of the plans. But of course, when we are talking about this, there is also a role for transport planners or transport experts in terms of balancing the long-term planning and short-term experimentation. Because the both parties, they have different interests, so it's important that we need to make sure on this one. We have seen in many Turkish cities there were a lot of SUMPs prepared in the past or transport master plans prepared in the past, but we have noticed that not many of them were respected during the implementation. They were revised different times based on the changing agendas of the decision makers. So that's very critical to keep in mind as critical success factor for SUMPs. And maybe I can mention some other elements which is very critical from my perspective is that establishment of right data collection, measurement, and monitoring scheme. This will be very critical, and especially for the Turkish cities, this is quite important because as UITP, when we deployed some projects in Turkish cities, we have faced a lot of problems from this perspective as well. And maybe what I have seen also as part of this, let's say, as part of this project is the capacity, the building the capacity. But when I say building the capacity, it's not only for building the human capacity. Of course, the people capacity is very important, who will be implementing, but also the institutional capacity is very, very key. Do we have the right organizations to implement this, or they are equipped with the right skills, or they are equipped with the right processes, procedures, or with the enough power? So that's what I could be telling as the key critical success factors for the SUMPs in the Turkey for the future.
Thank you, Kaan. Thank you. Very good ones. Very good replies, all very good replies. Now we have, I think we still have a bit of time. I have the information that in the closing, one of our participants will not be able to do so. Maybe we have a few more minutes. So we have some questions. And I pick and distribute, if you allow, to also save time. For instance, one of them is clearly for Shashi. The audience asks, you mentioned integration and attractiveness behind the successes of London. So what kind of work was done to increase attractiveness and to convince citizens to use, I think this is more for the public transport and for the sustainable modes, let's put it this way. Shashi.
Well, let me answer that question in two different ways. One is that if you look at the sort of visible integration, so making, for example, the design of interchanges very good. So, we get out of a train station, how do you get to a bus stop? How to make sure that those that interchange becomes very convenient to people. So that's one type of physical integration that's very important. Where you have less frequent services, making sure that timetables are coordinated so that people can get the right kind of connection. That's kind of what you would call physical integration. There's then the sort of experience integration, which is making sure, for example, that the Oyster card is valid across all transport services in London. You only need an Oyster card, you can travel around everywhere. We've gone from the Oyster card to contactless card, where basically anyone can travel. You can arrive from Turkey at Heathrow Airport, and you can start traveling without having to buy a ticket because you've already got a card in your pocket that will pay for your transport. That kind of experience integration becomes important. We've had open data for nearly 15 years now. Hundreds and hundreds of apps have been built. Data has become easily accessible to people in a form that they want as a result of it. So there's physical integration, there's the sort of experience integration. I think sitting underneath all of this, you have to ask how all of this happened. There's a hidden, invisible form of integration that's also very important. In many cities around the world, and I don't know the Turkish systems as well, but in most cities around the world that I've worked in, the reason that these things don't happen is that the institutional integration is not there. The bus system is run by one company, the rail system is run by another company, the roads are managed by a different company, etc., etc. And it's impossible to get them to coordinate with each other. And as much effort as is put into coordination, the reality is that you only achieve that when there is institutional integration across all of these different parties. That was what happened with the creation of Transport for London back in 2000. All of these things got put under one roof, under one management, and many of the things that you see as being so successful in London are a result of that institutional integration. So again, I'll speak back to the mayors again and say, this is within your remit. This is something that you can do. And it is probably the most far-reaching policy intervention that you can make. It's much easier to go and put down a bus lane or a bicycle lane because that's visible. But if you do the difficult work of integrating the institutions that are responsible for transport, you will achieve lasting solutions and with solutions that will produce much bigger impact than any single intervention can ever do.
Thank you, Sashi. Very good. It's really interesting because the other question, George, I would like you to take it if you like, because you mentioned, Sashi, about the integration. So the question is about how can we break the trend of individual transportation caused during the pandemic. So how can we give up on using the individual car? How can we break this trend? And of course, the obvious underlining message here is about probably non-motorized transport and public transport.
Sure. Yeah, it's a question that requires many different efforts. I think we've discussed many of them today. I fully agree with Sashi. For example, institutions, and Khan also raised this, building institutions and integrating them is important. And let me tie this into this question. In many cities, for example, traffic management is a separate entity, separate function from public transport planning or the planning of non-motorized facilities, sidewalks, footpaths, cycling infrastructure, and this needs to be, there needs to be an integration or planning done at some level to be able to make the right choices, to prioritize public transport, active mobility over individual car use. I think that the pricing is quite important in demand management. I think that that's also a lesson coming out of the pandemic. I think it's also very difficult to do, but we cannot just think that solutions are in the supply side. It's obvious that on the demand side, we need to provide the right signal to people, to users, on what are the modes, what are the proper costs for each mode, and how they also support the objectives we talked about, previously, the sustainable mobility objectives that we all want. So I think that there's no one solution. There's no silver bullet to this question of how to be able to. The car is not necessarily the enemy. I mean, it's a very important tool for all of us, but it needs to have the proper role in the city. And I don't just mean the cars. I mean, in many developing world cities that we see, there's an explosion of motorcycles, and they provide fantastic accessibility, but there are many drawbacks, obviously, to having motorcycles everywhere. And so the balance of all these things is quite important, and this is why the solution may be different in each city.
Okay, thank you, George. Another question, Kaan, maybe you can pick this up about the integration, the regulations on bicycles and scooters, and how do they take part as part of the transport system?
Thank you, Gupta. I think it's also an important point. Maybe let me very quickly add something to on what George said. I think it's very critical here that we all need to start working very heavily on restoring the trust of the public to the public transport, because we lost a little bit the trust to the public transport during the last 2 years. Especially, there were a lot of mistakes coming from the different authorities in different parts of the world. Now it's very important to give the right messages to the audiences, to the citizens, that the public transport is not the main source of transmitting the viruses. We have seen this as a result of the many researches around the world. So we need to give the right message to the audience that to build the trust back to the public transport. So that's very important, what I can tell as additional to what George said. And secondly, regarding the bikes and scooters, I know we know that it's a very important point of discussion. Also in Turkey cities, of course, we see such kind of modes as, let's say, as a complementary to the urban transport. They are important part of the urban mobility puzzle. But what I can tell is that at the end, now we have to continue for investing, let's say, for biking, for bike sharing schemes, for the walking, all different type of active mobility modes. But let's keep in mind that they will not be solving alone our problems. So if we are expecting to solve the current mobility crisis that we are facing as of today with investing on the bikes and so on, we will be very romantic, unfortunately. So the solution is not on this side. Of course, this is part of the solution. It's very important, but it will not be enough. So the main solution will be on the other side, how we can be reducing the traffic congestion with the car ownership and car usage, and as well how we can ensure about the mode shift to the public transportation. So that will be the main solution. Then we should also enforce this together with supporting the other active mobility modes as well.
Thank you, Kaan. Johanna, on this one, do you have any examples of regulation on cycling or especially scooters? How is it in Brussels? I don't know.
Well, in Brussels, during the pandemic, really transformed many car lanes into bicycle lanes, and the whole discussion is that they want to keep it that way. And many cities that we interviewed during the City Moonshot initiative had the same attitude. But I want to use the example of Copenhagen that is really making a very good, optimizing their bicycle lanes, and they're integrating it into the traffic management of the city. So I think it was mentioned by George that most of the time, or by Sashi, I apologize for not remembering who of my colleagues here mentioned it, but most of the time you have this separation between the traffic management center or procedures and the transport planning and the cycling and the infrastructure and so on at 3 different departments, and they're not integrated and aligned. And in Copenhagen, they have a very good system where they are the city and the industry, the traffic industry, are working together on how to integrate the traffic on the bicycle lanes and actually prioritize it against the car lanes, so that they promote this modal shift. They give what I was talking about, the green waves, the green traffic lights for the bicycle users, so that they arrive on time. And yeah, if that means sacrificing the arrival time of some of the cars, that's fine, because Copenhagen is promoting a more active transport. So that is indeed the solution, is the integration of the modes. It's the support of the public transport. And as Kaan was mentioning, to return some of the confidence that was lost, not entirely, but some of the confidence there and the trust in the public transport. That should be the backbone of mobility in cities. Absolutely. And my final point, in Europe and in the European level discussions, it's very important that we focus on the user needs and we involve users in decision making. But not only that, all users, and this is the accessibility, the inclusivity, this affordability that was mentioned before. It's not the white men of a certain status, it's all the users, the ones that are visually impaired, the women, the elderly. So for example, when we're discussing about automation, in cities and what cities can do with this connected cooperative automated mobility. Yeah, you have an automated shuttle, is running at night, it's fantastic, it's very easy to use for everyone, but can women use an automated shuttle that doesn't have a driver or anyone in there at 2 o'clock in the morning as easily as men? That is a discussion.
Absolutely, that's a very good point, Joanna. Thank you very much. Also, gender equity and also inclusiveness should be an important consideration. And I know that it's on the agenda also of UITP quite strongly. So, I mean, with this, I would like to, if you allow me, to wrap up the discussion a little bit. And before doing that, once more, as part of the we are now approaching European Mobility Week from 16 to 22nd of September. It's quite an important awareness raising week all over Europe. Thousands of cities are participating. Last year from Turkey, 564 cities and towns and cities participated. And this year's underlined message is that public transport is safe and it is healthy, as Kaan also underlined, and it should play its role in the city's transport system and network. Otherwise, we'll have a problem. As Joanna mentioned, going back to normal with the pandemic is probably not an option for many cities because it's not going to really bring us anywhere. So after underlining, I would like to also invite all cities around the world, including Turkish cities, to register their actions and their cities for the European Mobility Week. So my takeaways from this great session, and thank you to the all participants. First, I think the vision is important for the city. And how do you take a vision is really makes a difference. It should be the social equity, safety, healthy cities, healthy streets is an important consideration. Inclusiveness is an important consideration. Affordability is for your establishing your vision is really important, and these were all underlined today by all participants. Institutional regulatory setup. Especially, Sashi made an excellent intervention on what is behind. If you don't have an institutional setup that is supported by regulatory powers or legislative powers, maybe you are not really rowing, or even if you row in the right direction, you will have a difficult row. Maybe you'll be rowing against the stream. It's not going to be so easy. Digitalization and data was underlined by all speakers almost. The importance of data and usage of digitalization, but also it is important to understand that it's not an easy answer to difficult problems. I need to really underline this one. once you establish your vision, you have your institutional legislative basis. Now then, I think it's a good part is all about communication to the public, to the decision makers, to the civil society, to the operators in the city. And a part of it goes to, after this, of course, the integration of the modes we mentioned, pricing we mentioned, attractiveness and marketing was mentioned, which all requires somehow investments on the supply side, heavy investments or soft investments, but it requires investments and it requires a lot of money. And on the demand side, it's the demand management. But of course, when we say investment, I think Sashi's point on who pays is a very pertinent question. And he gave a very good example of how he expects to evolve in London. I think users pay is also an principle within the EU, and we will have to see this social equity, how to share the city, how to share the public space within the citizens, and how much cars taking place in the cities is an important consideration. And this user pay probably looks like going to be an important agenda in the upcoming period. We mentioned demand management is really an important aspect. And of course, we mentioned many other things about the relevance and importance of data, but I'm not going to go into all details. These are my takeaways. The good news is, dear participants and dear cities, I think a sustainable urban mobility plan involves all of these elements. It starts with a vision, and it goes into also, it takes into consideration many of these elements that I just mentioned. So we will have an opportunity. Now I would like to also invite my colleague from the World Bank, Murat Gürmeriç. We are going to manage the contract together with Murat. He is the team leader in Turkey, and he will be in touch with all of the municipalities. And our ambition is to start also rowing in this direction. Murat, welcome. Any last words from your side?
Hello. For the purposes of the closing, I would like to continue in Turkish. To address our actual audience better.
Tamam.
Herkese tekrar selamlıyorum ve özellikle katılması için çok teşekkür ediyorum. Çok zaten konunun her boyutu gündeme getirildi. Bunları tekrar etmeye gerek görmüyorum. Sadece iki duyuru yapmak istiyorum burada aslında kapanırken. Birincisi bizim Dünya Bankası olarak bu süreçte bu SUM yani Sürdürülebilir Kentsel Hareketlilik Planları programına ilave olarak bununla paralel yürüteceğimiz bir elektrikli mobilitenin aynı zamanda geliştirilmesi konusunda bir analitik çalışmamız var. Bunu da paralel olarak yürüteceğiz. Yani benzer bir nitelikte ve tamamlayıcı bir çalışım ama farklı kaynaklardan farklı bir proje olduğu için bununla ilgili olarak da önümüzdeki hafta sizlerden her iki projeyle ilgili bazı isteklerimiz olacak. Temas noktası belirtmenizi isteyeceğiz ve bir takım bilgi isteklerimiz olacak. Bu konuda bir karışıklık olmaması için özellikle karar olmayacak. Bir de tamamlayıcı bir proje. O konuda da size duyuru yapacağız. Onu bir hatırlatmak istedim.
Complementary projects, so please send me the information as accurate as possible. And second, the contact of the contact people in this project will be very critical, especially the capacity building program for the preliminary works of this project. We will need to talk to the right people. So please send us the correct point of contact. Your support in this regard is very important for us. You have our email addresses. You can reach us anytime you wish. And I would like to give the floor once again to Göktuğ. Thank you very much. Thank you. Our local administrations, they will be owning this project. They will be running this project. We will be only the supporting partners. So I certainly hope that it's going to be very beneficial for Turkey, and I'm really very honored to be a part of such a significant project. Thank you very much, Murat. I think this was a very special kickoff meeting. It's a very critical Project Angel also said in his speech. I mean, we're talking about a 35 million euros worth of a budget to prepare the sustainable urban mobility plan. Also, the other project is dedicated a high amount of support. This is very critical for the European Union, especially under the scope of Paris Agreement. This issue becomes more at the top of the agenda. So,
bence yani SUNK diyeceğim. Bu
our aim, as you also said it, these SUMPs,
iletişim gereklilikleriyle hem vizyon
our objective is to prepare these SUMPs
olması gerektiği gibi
correctly and accurately, and we will definitely support our cities in this process. And the outcomes will be, I'm sure, amazing. And thank you very much once again for your participation.
Belediye başkanlarımız sağ olsun.
And I would like to also
kendi işte başkan
thank
seviyesinde
to
yoğun
other
mesailerin
relevant parties. I
içerisinde
would
bu
like to thank
etkinliğe hem
the
katıldılar hem
mayors.
videolarını
I mean,
gönderdiler hem
despite
sosyal
their
medyadan
very busy
desteklerini aldık.
agendas,
Onlara
they
teşekkür
have
ediyoruz. Dünya
participated
Bankası
in this
tarafındaki tüm
meeting. They
çalışan
have sent their
arkadaşlarımıza
videos.
teşekkür
They have
ediyoruz.
supported
Bu
us in
hazırlık
their social
çoğunlukla
media
onların
accounts. I would like to thank
etkinlikleriyle ve
everyone
onların
related
çabalarıyla
in the
ilerletildi.
World Bank
Burada bizi
as well.
destekleyen teknik
They
ekiplerin
had
hepsine çok
exerted great
teşekkür ediyoruz.
efforts
Artık
to
bundan sonra
organize
sahada
this
konuşacağız.
meeting. I
Burak'cığım,
would
başka
like to
diyecek bir şey
thank
kalmadı.
the technical staff
Herkese iyi
too.
günler
They have a great day.
ve mutlu bir
Have a
hafta sonu
great
diliyoruz. Artık
rest of the
çarşambadan
week.
devirdik sayılır haftayı. Buradan artık
Now let's
işe
go
geri
back
dönelim
to our
ve işe
jobs
koyulalım.
and let's start working.
Çok teşekkürler.
The World Bank is pleased to contribute to the urban mobility agenda in Turkey, building on our experience in Turkey and elsewhere, and connecting municipalities to global best practices. We are also pleased with our strong partnership with the European Union, and we are proud to work with Turkish municipalities and local governments on a project that will play an essential role in supporting the country's goal for a long-term, sustainable, inclusive, and more resilient growth path.
Our experience in the EU shows that sustainable urban mobility planning directly impacts the air quality, decreases carbon emissions and congestions, increases road safety by making infrastructure safer. I'm glad that Turkish cities have benefited and will continue to benefit from the EU financial assistance to deal with the urban mobility problems. And thus, they will contribute to the global effort to fight against the climate change. We are seeking to expand our cooperation opportunities in Turkey. This time, we are proud to announce our collaboration with the World Bank.